So have a seat, strap in. This is going to be a little bit longer of a video. After this quick clip of me taking a rip through the New Hampshire White Mountains, I'm going to go into a bit of a 3,000 mile review, some things that I've discovered along the way. So sit back and enjoy. Thank you. Hi, how you doing? It's been a long time since I posted a video. I've been out driving quite a bit, actually, and I believe I just turned 2,800 miles, a little bit more than that, actually. So almost 3,000 miles I put on this summer, and I think I registered the car in June. So I've got some really good time behind the wheel. I thought it made sense to post a video for a couple of reasons. One, the clip you just saw, and that was me ripping through the White Mountains. I've been kind of itching to do that all summer, and the weather has just been a bear. For those of you in the Northeast, you know where I'm coming from. We've had more rain than we should have had, and the upside is the grass looks very green. The downside is not great for driving convertibles. But that clip you just saw was me taking a ride up through the White Mountains, specifically the Kangamangas Highway. It's kind of one of our more epic drives up this way. So most of my drives have been along the ocean. It was nice to actually get this thing up into the mountains and see some different terrain. But the purpose behind this video is I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about some of the things that I wished I had done during the build. And I know I mentioned this on my last video, but now that I've got a little more time behind the wheel and some of these things have popped up here and there, I thought it made sense to kind of talk about it a little bit. First off, I will say the car continues to impress me, and I haven't had any scenarios where it didn't start or it didn't run. I have not been stranded. It has just worked flawlessly, and I'll put a little asterisk next to flawless, and I'm going to talk about that shortly. But I'm going to make two categories here in this video. One is the things I wished I had done during the build, and I kind of knew I should have done these through the build, and I just kind of missed it. So I'm going to let you kind of in on those, and that I think would be helpful for anybody in the process of building one of these things. And then I'm going to talk about some of my observations that really I couldn't have foreseen. You know, things that kind of popped up, and what I've done to solve them, or what I'm going to do to solve them. So let's kick this off with a little bit of a walk around, and I'll show you where I'm at and get into some of these specifically. So these next couple of things I'm going to lump into the category of things I'm glad I did. And I'm going to start real quickly with the third brake light. And I know there's lots of information on how to add a third brake light to these cars. It's all over the forum, and I think it's worth considering, and I think it's worth considering during the initial stages of the build, when it comes down to running wiring, or if it comes down to actually creating a location for that third light, maybe getting creative as to where you mount it or what you do with it. But here's my take on the third tail light. And really since the 80s, cars have added that third brake light. So it's not necessarily an intensity thing, so we're not seeing more red light splashing in our direction that tells us to stop. In a lot of cases, it's the addition of that third light in the middle that even at a subconscious level tells us to stop. And I think that's where the importance comes into it. It's what drivers in general are accustomed to seeing that tells them to stop, and it's the addition of that third light. It just so happens that mine is obnoxiously bright. I'm happy to report that I had a friend of mine who was a few cars behind me driving along. It was dusk, and he said that when I hit my brakes, that my rear end was the brightest rear end out of the sea of cars in front of him. So that made me feel pretty good. The other thing I wanted to point out is that right from the get-go, I knew I was going to do LED headlights. I chose the all-in-one assembly, a 7-inch LED light. It wasn't simply a LED bulb replacement. One of the things that I've noticed as I've gotten older is that my nighttime driving, my visibility during nighttime driving has gotten a little sketchy. So I absolutely love my LED headlights. They're at least as good as my 2023 Volkswagen, which I consider to have very, very good headlights. So I'm glad I did that, and I would highly consider doing it. I think it was a $150 investment for these lights. They're an option for a Jeep Wrangler, and that's where I found these lights. And they fit right into the stock location. They're a little it takes a little time to adjust them because they are so kind of pinpoint. The cutoff lines are very sharp on them, so you get a little spend of time tweaking them, but I think it's well worth it. So look at my handy dandy little list here. Another quick thing I'd point out is on tire pressure. I'm kind of just rambling off some things here that I found over the past couple of months. Tire pressure, I kind of have gone back and forth on this. There really isn't clear tire pressure that you should be running in these. A lot of it's going to depend on the type of tire you have. These cars are very light, so your tire pressures are going to be lower than you're used to seeing. I started off at 22.5, I think, and I was noticing a little extra wear along the edges, so I beefed it up. I think I'm around 23, 24, thereabouts, but I did use that technique where you measure the temperature using a laser reader across the width of the tire after driving, and that did allow me to kind of dial in tire pressure. I found that I was running a little too low and the outside of the tires were a little too warm. So, kind of be ready to go into that a little bit with your car. Minor thing, but thought I'd mention it. Let's talk about some of the things that I wished I had done that I didn't do during my build. So first, when I assembled the rear end, the upper and lower control arms surrounding my independent rear suspension gave me some problems, and not during the installation and not during the first 500, 600, or 700 miles. Somewhere around that 1,000-mile mark, I developed some squeaks in the rear end, and I guess it was a little earlier than that, but it was absolutely, it was very frustrating. I'd go over bumps and you'd hear this kind of squeak, squeak, almost a thunk, thunk kind of sound. I chased it, it sounded mechanical. My neighbor pointed out it actually sounds more like rubber against metal kind of sound. So I went back and forth on this, and I know that people in the forum are probably tired of me asking these questions. So I ended up kind of going back at all the grease fittings. I just pumped them full of grease again, cleaned it, pumped them, and it wasn't going away, but I was noticing differences when I was doing that. So that prompted me to actually disassemble the rear a bit, at least enough where I could disassemble the areas around the bushings, and I lubed the bushings kind of intentionally. I wasn't just relying on pumping them full of grease, and I lubed them by hand and then put them back together. And now that was about 2,000 miles ago, and that completely solved my problem. The rear end is nice and quiet. There's a little bit of thunk going on, and I think it has to do with maybe the quality of the end, the rod ends. I'm not sure what you call those things. But I might end up improving those at some point, but what I've got right now I can completely live with. So I guess my advice in a real short way, instead of the way I just put it to y'all, is to lube the bushings kind of intentionally. Make sure they're completely, all the parts that could contact have grease on them during assembly. So what else I got here? So I was struggling with some issues surrounding some erratic idling on the car. The car was great under power, and anything over 1,500 RPMs, just silky smooth and beautiful. Below 1,500 RPMs is a little bumpy, and I was getting some idling surge where I'd come up to a stoplight and the idle would kind of catch up going up and down, and then it would settle and it'd be fine. And this was after the engine heated up a little bit. I could not tune this out with my Holley Sniper. I have a Holley Sniper EFI. No matter what I did to it, it wouldn't fix that. I spent a lot of time hunting down exhaust leaks, and I figured that might be the culprit, and it turned out it was, and it was at the ball flange. That I think most of these cars, when you build them, you're going to end up using some sort of ball flange on the exhaust. And I had a tiniest little leak at that flange where the two balls, the ball and the cup meet. And this was probably, 500 miles ago, 600 miles ago. I separated them and I put a really thin very thin coat of RTV, the red stuff that's rated exhaust safe and up to 750 degrees, reassembled it, and that was it. That was my problem. My idling cleaned up, the engine, below 1,500 RPMs got smoother. It returns to an idle quickly and stays at a consistent RPM. So I guess if you're going to build these things, if you're going to build one of these things with that ball flange, Don't rely just on the mechanical connection making a seal. I'd put that thin layer of RTV in there. I don't think there's any downside to it, not that I can think of. Anything you're doing with that stuff, I imagine you could peel it out and start fresh if you wanted to. But like I said, I've got about 500 miles on it, and that was a problem solver. That changed the way that the car sounded at that lower RPM range. What else? Coolant tank. I probably should have gone with a larger coolant tank than the one that was included with the kit. It's not quite big enough. On those hot days, it was kind of bubbling over, and then it was dropping dangerously low to the bottom end of it. So I think that is going to be something I'm going to swap out at some point. I've had to add coolant a couple times, and it's because it's bubbling. It's bubbling out. It's boiling off. And there's just not enough space in that tank to accommodate cold engine to super hot engine. So I'm going to end up going to a larger tank at some point. It's not critical as long as you're aware of adding fluid every now and then or cooling every now and then, but I'm definitely going to fix that. Let's see, what else? Oh, dead pedal. This is a good one too. I wished I installed a dead pedal next to the clutch early in the installation before I did the interior. It's difficult to do afterwards. Man, did it change the way your feet sit in the foot box. In fact, thinking back, it's almost, in my opinion, almost undrivable for any length of time without that dead pedal sitting next to the clutch. And in case you don't know what dead pedal is, it's that hard, firm rest where your left foot sits when it's not actually on the clutch. It made a world of difference, and I just used a piece of aluminum aluminum angle aluminum angle, there we go, and bolted it in place. I had to mess around a little bit with its location to make it comfortable, but had I done that before the interior was installed, before the body was on, you would have had more access to get in there and actually mount it. So I would just go right to installing a dead pedal and just assume it's mandatory at this point, because it really, in terms of the way I'm driving and the way I feel, it absolutely is a mandatory part of this part of your foot box. So one of the little improvements I think I'm going to make on this next is, not that I'm looking for projects, but maybe I am, because I kind of miss working on it. It's one of those things where for a year or two you work on this car all the time, and then you stop working on it and you end up kind of missing it. But this is not one of those cases, I assure you. So one of the issues I'm having, and it's a small issue, very, very small issue, and it's because I'm a little bit of a freak when it comes to rattles, that even with everything tightened up in the door, you're still going to get a little play here. I mean, very little. But when this is in the latched position, the latch doesn't clamp on tightly to the pin, the door pin. I mean, it clamps it sufficiently to hold the door closed, but not to keep it from rattling. So there's a little bit of play in between the pin and the latch. And when you're going over bumps, you can hear it. And I don't hear it on the passenger side, maybe just because of its distance away, but the driver's side, obviously it's 10 inches from your ear. So one of the things I think I'm going to do is I'm going to borrow a little bit of inspiration from what most of the automotive manufacturers do, and they have some sort of positive connection between the door and the frame, and that positive connection kind of forces the door, takes the door's weight at the same time as it gives something for the door to draw into, to get rid of that little bit of play that might be happening. So I'm going to do that. I'm probably going to machine something out of nylon, both the male portion of that and the female portion of that. And maybe I'll do a quick video on that and what I end up doing. I'm still kind of in the design process, but I need to do something because it's driving me bananas. You can see here I put a little piece of foam here trying to contact the door. There's another one under here. The truth is that foam kind of compresses to the point at some point where it's no longer effective. And so that will be a quick little maybe short video I'll put together at some point soon. But that's one of the small things that I'm going to be doing coming up. The other is I do have a few paint issues. I think some areas where I might end up actually repainting my hood scoop area for some reason. I got some waves in the paint there, and I swear it was not there when I painted the car, but it's there now because I do notice it. It's small, only kind of, I'm sure only I'm noticing it, but that's an easy area to repaint, so I'm gonna kind of do that. Otherwise, I might also look at changing out the rear brake pads to something that's not quite as dust prone. I'm not getting much dust out of the front, but I'm definitely getting more dust out of the rear. I know my brake bias is correct. I've tested it. The dust is a different color front to rear, so I suspect that the pads that came with the kit are different in the rear. So that might be a winter time swap. They work great, no complaints about performance, just the brake dust is absolutely obnoxious. I mean, I go out on a 30 or 40 mile drive and I've got a nice layer of orange dust on the rear wheels and virtually nothing on the front. So the other thing that I would recommend doing while you're doing the wiring specifically, but run extra wires to the front and rear. I ended up installing a set of driving lights, and it's a pain to run wire after you run all the wires and seal them up in the looms after the car is built and done, painted. Running wires is not easy, and it's never as clean a job as it would be if it was done from day one. The same goes for the rear of the car. I do have reverse lights, and I wanted reverse lights for two reasons. One, obviously to aid in backing up so you can see kind of where you're going, but also I think we kind of forget that reverse lights are also an indicator in parking lots to pedestrians walking by that the car is in reverse. And again, that's something we're kind of programmed to look for. You see a car in reverse lights with reverse lights on, you know that it's getting ready to back up, or at least that's the intention. So I wanted reverse lights for that reason. So I would run extra wires front and rear, even if you choose not to use them later on, no biggie, you just got an extra set of wires there. But I didn't for the front, for the driving lights, and that was a mistake. It took me a long time to get those wires in the front, and there was a wire, I actually had forgot myself, even though I had plans from day one to install reverse lights in this, I had forgot to run wires to the rear for those reverse lights. So there's a quick tip that might save you some time and ultimately yield a cleaner job. So I apologize for the kind of piecemeal way that this video is going together, but I keep finding things that I wanted to talk about. So as you know, I went with a traditional, standard 3-point seatbelt harness, retractable seatbelts. I love them. They're easy to operate. The retractor sits down here. Everything kind of bolts right in. Honestly, I think I said this before. These are easier to put in than the stock Factory 5 seatbelts. But the retractable nature is nice because if you lean over to grab something in the footwell or turn around to get your sunglasses out of the cubby, you're not tethered in so tightly you can't move around. And then when you sit back, it retracts and locks. So definitely love those. And one final note here on the seat heaters. If you are anywhere north of the Mason-Dixon, or I don't know, anywhere north of Florida or the extreme south, spend the $80 and put in seat heaters. These things are amazing. They absolutely kind of changed the way some of these cool night drives have been. I've been out a couple of times in the 40s. We've had I don't know, 3 or 4 nights that have been in the mid 40s here, and they're simple to install. They're cheap, but they add a level of comfort here that's really surprising to me. I've been driving along thinking I'm a little cold here, and I kind of forgot I had them, and I flipped the switch, and then about 2 minutes later, I'm thinking, man, I'm glad I have these, and glad I remember to use them. So I would remember to kind of early on run some wires for the heated seats. It's that simple pad. I think they're only like $80 on Amazon. They slide right in. Right into the seat. They're super simple to do. The hardest part's just getting the wiring there. So again, when the car's in its wiring phase, run some seat heaters, and you'll be very glad you did. Run them off a separate relay too. They say you can run them right to some point off the ignition. I wouldn't trust that because there's a pretty substantial draw. So run them off of a relay at some point. But hey, yeah, there's one more little piece of advice, and I'm sure I'll have a few more coming. Here's something else I wanted to show you. It just kind of occurred to me, and again, I'm going to apologize for the piecemeal way this video is going together. It's just kind of seems to be how it's happening here. Let me get in here real quick. This is always a challenge with one hand. So the other thing I'd like to point out, I'll do it from this side, it'd be easier. One of the things I noticed pretty early on, several thousand miles ago, I noticed that this split loom that was covering the wiring, and this is the wiring that comes in and supports both the EFI, but it also is where your main 12 volt comes in to attach to your starter relay and so forth. I noticed that its proximity to that rear header right here, it was causing actually the split loom to deform a little bit from heat, and that made me a little more than nervous. So I wrapped it in that shiny heat reflective material, super cheap stuff, but it made a huge difference because I actually did, after a little bit, I wanted to verify that it was stopping enough of the heat to, so I'm not causing any additional problems. And I unclipped it and looked at it, and sure enough, no change to the wiring or the split loom since I put that in place. So I'd recommend doing that from the beginning. I also did that over here on the clutch cable. And my clutch cable runs kind of near the exhaust. This is a terrible view here. Sorry about that. Let me try it this way here. This might be easier. Okay, so this, even though this is just the exhaust, it's not necessarily near the header, but it still generates some heat. So the clutch cable runs, I have about an inch between here and this exhaust pipe. The clutch cable seems to me to be one of those areas you really want to make sure you reduce the amount of heat going to it. It's a cable running through a sheath, so the cooler you keep that, the longer it's going to last. So it'd be a rather bad place for a failure. So I wrapped it in this heat protecting material as well. So kind of wished I'd done that from the beginning because it was difficult to get in there to do it correctly afterwards. But that's really the only other parts I can think of that I've made any changes to in the engine bay. Everything else in here is held up nicely. I think I already mentioned that I did have some issues with the header bolts backing out. Finally got that nailed down. I only had 2 or 3 bolts that were causing a problem, so I put those locking header bolts in, and I don't know if you can, I'll try to zoom in here, see if I can get that. So you can see right there, I put those locking header bolts in. I got to be honest with you, I didn't do it on all of them. I did it on the 3 or 4 bolts that were seeming to want to walk out on me a little bit, and that completely fixed the problem. No more issue there. So for those putting headers in, go ahead and do that right from the get-go. It's no more difficult to do it when you're initially bolting the headers in place. So I'll wrap up this kind of long video here with a quick walk around the car, show you some of the dents and dings that have happened over 3,000 miles or so. And I expect that to happen. Everything else is holding up really well, no complaints. So quick walk around, and then I don't know if I'm going to shoot another video before winter comes. Maybe if I get another couple of nice driving days in, I'll try to do something that way. But otherwise, what are we, a month or 2 away from some snow here? So that's when it stays parked. So here, enjoy the walk around, and I'll talk to you soon. I guess I'll talk to you now. That was kind of a ridiculous thing to say. Yeah, everything is kind of holding together great on the car. The finish I did end up putting that plastic paint protection, the vinyl protection over this. You can kind of see the outline of it right here, and it goes down to here. Man, I'm glad I did that because this thing takes all the abuse. These things just wipe off. But I drove this for about 100 miles before I put those in place, because I was told to wait for the paint to cure. And within those 100 miles, I had 2 or 3 serious paint chips there. So I had to do something. These there you go. There's one of the paint chips right there. That's under the plastic. But these are just dirt here. But there's a good indication right there. So hey, put this stuff on sooner than later, because it takes a beating pretty quickly. Exhaust is working great. I kind of expected some issues with maybe the exhaust kind of shaping or moving around a bit too much, dinging the paint up, but nope, it's held nice and tight. Everything else is great. Well, interior is held up well. Man, is it nice to see that there. Interior's held up great. You know, no real obvious signs of wear. The only thing I've changed since the build is I moved my key position down and a little lower, so it's not as kind of obvious as it was before, if those of you remember what it looked like before. But everything's going great. Love the gauges. These handles, I'm going to say it once again, probably the best decision I made on this car. It is just a dream getting in and out of this thing. I kind of reach in, I put my hand on this handle here, and I put all my weight on it and and then I'm able to pivot everything in without putting weight on the dash, the rear, the door, even the steering wheel. Those just made just a huge difference getting in and out of this thing. Same for my wife. She enjoys it too. So there you have it. Everything's held up really well. One last thing. I'm sorry, I keep finding one last thing. I'm definitely not happy with the rearview mirror. I've got to get a new piece of glass cut. A, the glass isn't a great quality glass. B, it's just too damn small. I'm going to get one that's maybe cut a little bit bigger and actually try to find some, things that are smaller than they appear mirror material, and do it that way, because it's too narrow focus. You don't quite see enough around you. My big old massive mirror here, these things are great. These get me out of a lot of trouble, but definitely need some help in the rearview mirror. So with that said, thanks again, and I will hopefully be putting together some sort of fall driving video here, maybe with some leaves in it, and I don't know if you'll find that exciting or not, but that'll probably be the last video from me this year at least. Thanks, have a good one.